Our next speaker, I'm very honored to introduce. It's Shelley WInner Dupree. Shelley and I have a mutual friend. Tracy Hunt is our mutual friend of the Skid Row Running Club in Los Angeles, California, which was founded by Judge Craig Mitchell. And if you haven't seen the inspiring Skid Row Running Club documentary, I urge you to check it out. Here's a judge who's making a difference with recidivism. Thank you, Tracy, for connecting us. And now about Shelley. Shelley shares that she is a formerly incarcerated restorative justice advocate working to reduce crime and recidivism. She is featured in a powerful 2019 TEDx talk about what we all can do to help. Shelley's talk today is entitled From Prison to Microsoft. Welcome, Shelley.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here today to share my story. You know, stories are such a powerful tool, right, to help change hearts and minds and ultimately change the world. And so, you know, I'm here today to share my story of incarceration and how I got out and re-entered society and landed a job with one of the biggest tech companies in the world, Microsoft. And so I think it's, for me, when I tell my story, I always start with my childhood, because that's kind of where it started, and how, you know, I ended up on the path that I you know, to prison had a lot to do with my childhood. And so I grew up with a father. He was in and out of prison most of my life, and for drugs and alcohol, and he thought that doing drugs was cool. So at the age of 11, he got me drunk for the very first time. And there was a brief moment where I lived with him while I was in high school, and he was selling methamphetamine from our home. And there were people in and out of our house at all hours of the night buying drugs from him. And he told me one of the rules of the house was that if I ever wanted to use drugs, that I had to bring them home and share them with him. And although I never used drugs with my dad, not because he didn't want to, but it was because I didn't feel comfortable using drugs with him. Although I did use drugs with my peers, and like 76% of children who follow in their parents' footsteps, I followed in my father's by becoming an addict and ultimately an inmate as well. And so I became a full-blown addict. I mean, I was experimenting with drugs, you know, in high school, you know, using, I'd say more recreationally, but then I became a full-blown addict in my 30s, and I started selling drugs to support my habit. And I was addicted to meth and opiate pills. And eventually I started using heroin when I didn't have any opiates to take. So meth, opiates, and heroin, it's quite the addiction. And I started selling drugs to support my habit. And I eventually got caught. I sold 2 ounces of methamphetamine to a confidential informant, and the rest is history. They came to arrest me. It was actually the federal government. So although they caught me selling the drugs, they did not arrest me at that moment. What they did was they took that evidence to the grand jury and they got an indictment. And then a few months later, they came and arrested me. And I'll never forget that moment where there were just, 15 officers in full riot gear, AK-47s, AR-15s, you know, pounding down my door, screaming, "Shelley WInner, come out with your hands up." And I had been up for days, and I had finally fallen asleep, and then I get woken up to that noise. And I remember just waking up and everything was just slow motion. And they put the handcuffs on me, read me my rights. And I knew at that moment that I was in a lot of trouble. I wasn't quite sure how much trouble I was in until I found out about the minimum sentencing guidelines. So right after my arrest, they put me in a local jail there. I was in North Dakota at the time, and I withdraw. They gave me nothing to withdraw, And eventually they let me out of that, of the jail, and they put me into what's called a halfway house. And for those of you who don't know what a halfway house is, it just means you're halfway to freedom, because they'll allow you to work, but you're still an inmate. And so while I was at this halfway house, I was bringing drugs into the facility, and I still was using. And I had gotten through my withdrawals. I still wasn't feeling right. And so I went and took a pregnancy test, and I found out I was pregnant. So unlike, I think, a lot of people on this call who are, atheists, I mean, to share my story and be fully transparent with all of you, because this is part of my story, I have to be honest and let everyone know that I do believe in God. And God is a big reason for my life and my transformation today. And I heard about this faith-based treatment program called Adult and Teen Challenge. And I knew that if I was going to get through this, that I was going to need a higher power support. And so I got into the program, and that's where my journey of healing started, not only, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And so obviously I was, I'm pregnant, and it's, I'm out fighting my case. And I went before the judge, and he told me that I was looking at 10 years in prison. And here I am pregnant and thinking, how could I have just screwed up my life completely? And now my child's going to grow up without me. It was definitely a hard moment for me. I ended up giving birth to my son, and, I'm so grateful for my mother. She came down to North Dakota and took custody of my son, because he was gonna have to go into the system. And because of her, he didn't. And so after I gave birth to my son, 2 months later, I started my prison sentence. And I was very, very, very blessed, because the prison that I was at had a ton of rehabilitative classes and programs that I was able to attend, like Defy Ventures. I did another drug treatment program called RDAP, which stands for Residential Drug Abuse Treatment. I took classes on trauma. I took classes on forgiveness. I mean, I had a ton of classes that were available to me. And these classes taught me so much about myself. And they helped me build my confidence. They helped me get past these self-limiting thoughts and these self-limiting beliefs that I had my entire life, and how I just lived in complete fear. And once I learned a new way of life, I became so empowered. And I just felt like I had been in the dark my entire life. And now it was like, I see the truth, and I just wanted to be a productive human. I wanted to do good, and I wanted to make right, all of my wrongs. And so while I was in prison, I started really thinking about, how am I going to reenter society? Because now I have this criminal record. I don't have a college degree. I've got this new mindset about life, and I don't want to get out. I don't want some, dead end minimum wage job where I'm not going to make ends meet. I'm not going to be able to provide for my family or my son. So I started thinking about that I wanted to work in tech. And I started praying about this, and I started journaling, and I was very specific about what I wanted, and that I wanted a career and not just some dead end job. And, I believe that, by doing those things, you manifest it, because your thoughts are really your life, right? And what you think about, you will attract. And so to back it up a little bit, I didn't end up getting 10 years. I did end up getting 4 years. And so I did about 1.5 years in prison. So I was very, very lucky to not have to have done the 10 years. But so when I got out of prison, I hit the ground running. I was ready to take over the world. I heard about another program called Code Tenderloin, and this program helps people with criminal records get into tech companies. And it's funny, because I'm at the halfway house and the news is on. And all I hear is the reporter say, if you have a criminal record and you want to work in tech, then Code Tenderloin will help you. And I couldn't believe it because I just happened to be in the day room at that exact moment where the reporter was talking about that. I mean, that's not coincidental to me, right? And so I contacted the company and enrolled in the next cohort. And they took me on this tech tour where they introduced me to, we went to various tech companies like Microsoft, Twitter, LinkedIn, NerdWallet. And there we got to meet the employees there and develop relationships with them. We were at the Microsoft store and they had told me that they were hiring. So I submitted my resume and got called back for an interview. And this was such an exciting moment for me because here I was fresh out of prison. Now I'm interviewing with one of the biggest tech companies. And I knew if I could get my foot in the door at this company, that I would just work my way up into the career that I dreamed of while I was in prison. And so I went in for the interview and I nailed it. She hired me right on the spot. And I just remember leaving that interview that day, telling all my friends, telling all my family, I got the job at Microsoft. I was just so proud of myself. And I was honest with the interviewer and I said, well, thank you so much for this job offer. This means so much to me. But I do have to tell you something. I do have a criminal record. Will this hinder me from moving forward? And she said, well, I don't know, but just be honest about it on the background check. And then, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So I started doing the onboarding. I got the job offer. And so you do all of this before the background check because the background check typically takes about a month. And so I was honest about it on the background check and it came back flagged. They asked me why I had this charge on my record. And so I took that as an opportunity to explain to them a little bit about what I had done wrong, but more importantly, what I had done right and why they should give me a chance. It wasn't good enough for them. They said, I'm sorry, we don't hire people with criminal records. And what's interesting is during all of this onboarding process, Microsoft had actually sent me some information that was on one of the emails. And it said, if you have a criminal record and you feel like you've been discriminated against, click this link and contact the Fair Chance Ordinance. So I clicked on this link and I'm reading what this Fair Chance Ordinance is. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I became very hopeful. It said anybody within San Francisco, no companies can discriminate against anyone with a criminal record unless their crime directly relates. So, for example, if you robbed a bank, Wells Fargo would have a valid reason to not hire you. It also stated that if you have proof of rehabilitation, then they can't discriminate against you because you've been rehabilitated. And so I had, all those certificates of those programs that I did while I was in prison. I had a stack of them. So I had, this based off of what this Fair Chance Ordinance was stating, this little law in San Francisco, I fit that criteria. And so I became hopeful. And so when Microsoft rescinded my job offer, I was very confused because they're the ones who sent me that information. And so I was telling my mom, what happened. And she says, well, did you contact the FCO, the Fair Chance Ordinance? And I said, no, I didn't. She goes, well, just call them. I said, Mom, Microsoft sent me the information. Obviously, they know that about some loophole and, why they don't have to hire me. I mean, they sent it to me. And she says, just call them. So I did. And when the lady who answered asked me what company had discriminated against me, and I told her Microsoft, she said that she'd never fought a company this big and that she doesn't know if we'll win. But that she would fight for me. And she said the biggest company they'd ever fought was Foot Locker. And I told her, I said, well, what do I have to lose at this point? If I don't fight, I will always be left with what if. And so I went toe to toe with Microsoft and we went back and forth. And they, had every excuse. Well, you haven't been out of prison long enough and you're a liability. And what if you relapse? And what if we can't trust you around customers' data? And, every, I think, normal excuse a business would have, Microsoft came back with. And the lady at the Fair Chance Ordinance says, hey, you know what? We have these laws in place for a reason. Shelley has put in the work to turn her life around and she deserves a second chance. And just because you're Microsoft doesn't mean you don't have to abide by these laws. So ultimately, I won. I got my job back. And they were not happy. They were not happy about it. They said, okay, fine. Well, the original position you applied for has been filled. So now you've got to apply for this new position, which was the same one, but just same role, I mean. But now there were 3 other applicants that had already applied for that role. And so here I was up against 3 other applicants, and I just figured, oh my gosh, this is just a way for Microsoft to legally not hire me. They'll say that somebody better interviewed, somebody more qualified. And I went for my second interview, and I did terrible. I was nervous. I was scared. I didn't do well. And I knew in my heart, I felt in my heart that I did not get that job. And I left the interview, and I went back to the halfway house in San Francisco. I went to bed, and I slept that whole entire day. I was just so exhausted mentally. I woke up the next morning and started to process the fact that I wasn't going to be working at Microsoft. And I tried to figure out, okay, well, what does my future look like? What are my options here? And then I'd say about 2 days later, I get a phone call, and I look at my caller ID, and it says Microsoft. And I'm like, why is Microsoft calling me? And I answer, and she said, hi, is this Shelley? I said, yeah. She says, hi, this is a recruiter over at Microsoft, and I just wanted to call you to let you know that we're offering you the job. And I just screamed. I was like, what? Are you serious? And she's like, oh my God, I've never had such an amazing response before. And I just told her, I said, you have no idea what I've been through. Oh, I thought for sure I didn't get this job. And oh, yes, I'll accept the offer. And I remember I got off the phone, and I'm running down the hallway, and I'm yelling so all my neighbors can hear me. I got the job, you guys, I got the job. I run downstairs. I'm trying to find, I'm telling all the staff, I'm trying to find my counselor. I got the job because, everybody knew that, had been going through this with me because I'd updated everybody on everything that I was going through with Microsoft. And so it just felt so amazing. I'm proud to say that I've been at the company now for 5 years, 9 months. From the very beginning, to me, because of my experience in going to prison, it wasn't just a job to me. It was an opportunity that was going to change my life. And so when I came to work every single day, I was so grateful to be there. And I just had this attitude of gratitude, and I climbed the ladder very quickly. And so I'm proud to say that not only have I been there, 5 years and 9 months, but I'm one of their top performing employees. I finished last year as their #1 surface seller in the entire world. So to put that into perspective, there's hundreds of B2B sellers. I actually finished as the #1 in the world. Not only that, I won a very prestigious award. Less than 2% of Microsoft's employees actually win this award, and it's called Gold Club. And I'm so excited because they're taking me and my husband, actually leave Monday, on a full paid trip to Playa del Carmen. We get to stay in this beautiful resort, and I'm just so excited. So I hope that you all enjoyed my story, and I think I have hopefully enough time to open it up for some questions. So thank you, everybody.
So we have till 7:30 to talk to you and ask questions and maybe share a little bit.
I have a question, Margaret.
Great, Dave.
Yeah. Shelley, thanks so much for sharing. And you've got to check out the chat. I mean, there's some really supportive comments in there. And please, no apologies needed for, having a belief system that works for you. And, many of us are non-religious here, but we really support people's right to choose to believe.
Thank
you. We're a community. So thanks so much for your story. And here's my question. I mean, this has got to be such an unusual story to have broken through and made it the way that you did. But what's your sense of how many people face what you faced and just get shut down like that? I mean, even though they get the job, and then they shut down. I mean, I heard a podcast that had, I think he's an executive with Nike sharing his story, and it was a similar story. Got his education, got the degree, came out, got this great job offer, and then told him as the offer was being given to him about his incarceration, and then rejected it, and then he had to go back and fight. What's your sense of how often that occurs?
How often people go back and fight, or how often they're rejected?
How often that they're just rejected. I mean, what do you think the percentages are? All the time, like 90, 99% type thing. Yeah.
I would say most people are with, especially in tech companies. I know that since I started at Microsoft, my story has done a lot to help change, the culture there. And they have actually joined the Second Chance Business Coalition. So they have publicly made a pledge to now hire people with criminal convictions. And so what they'll do is they'll do a case-by-case, but like it's on a case-by-case basis. So they'll, instead of just automatically rejecting you because of your criminal record, they'll actually take the time to learn, and to talk to you and to figure out what happened and, figure out what your rehabilitation efforts were before just giving you a hard no. So, but they still have some restrictions for certain crimes, right? And so, I think most companies will, especially if it's a crime that directly relates, but they're definitely, doing what they can to, they changed their hiring policy in San Francisco also. So that's good news. And I think what's great about this story is because what Microsoft does, other companies follow suit. And I think we're seeing more and more companies now changing their hiring policies, but not everyone. I'd say it's probably, 50-50.
Well, that's good. That's progress.
Yeah. So,
Shelley, I'm glad you forced Microwave to reboot.
Microwave.
Microsoft to reboot.
Yeah. I mean, it was, there were times when I almost gave up. I faced a lot of fear, and I thought, if I fight Microsoft and I win, even if I win, they're going to treat me differently because I forced them to hire me. And, people's perceptions and what society thinks about people who've been to prison, aren't always the best. And I figured my coworkers would treat me differently. My managers would treat me differently. I thought they would retaliate, Microsoft would retaliate. I'm so glad I didn't listen to any of that fear, because you know what? None of it came true. None of it. They've embraced me. PBS heard about my story, did a whole show on me, and contacted Microsoft and asked if we could use their name, and they said yeah, absolutely. And they said that we're super proud of Shelley, and we're so blessed to have her working for us. So it's just crazy how it just takes one person to stand up for what's right and not be afraid, right? And look, I mean, this one little girl that got out of prison that stood up for herself changed an entire, one of the biggest companies in the world.
Awesome. Butterfly.
We have two questions. We have one from Gail and one from Rhett. That's the queue. You want to go first, Gail?
You may have answered my question, because I was wondering if you had any reactions from coworkers when you first were hired. Did people know, and did they treat you any differently?
They eventually found out, because going through that experience created this passion inside of me to be a voice. Because now that Microsoft knows and I'm allowed to speak freely about it, this was it's almost like this experience had to happen this way in order for me to now be able to shout from the rooftops and not be afraid, right, of losing my job. And so I started doing a lot of speaking engagements, including, my TED Talk. And so the more vocal I was about it, eventually all of my coworkers found out. Now, I don't think they had an issue with it. At least they never told me, but they did have an issue with the fact that I was rising the ladder so quickly. I got promoted. So I've been promoted 4 times since I've been working there. And this one promotion that I got, there were 7 other applicants at the store that were wanting that promotion. Like 4 of them had been there for years waiting. And I got the promotion over everybody. And so needless to say, they weren't happy about that. that was what made them not like me, but not necessarily the fact that I was formerly incarcerated, but I'm sure being formerly incarcerated, after I got promoted, just added fuel to their fire. That was the only time I ever experienced anything negative from my peers.
Wonderful story. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Gail totally stole my question. We are on the same page, Gail. I was thinking the same thing, just if anybody knew or how they treated you, but no, you answered the question. So thank you so much for sharing. So brave of you. I'm so proud that you fought the way you did and that you conquered them. I'm a network administrator, and I've been with Microsoft, not working there, but I've been using their products since, their inception. And I've had a love-hate with them, but I'm proud that they're giving you money, even if I am negative against them. So thank you, Shelley.
I feel a certain way about Microsoft. Yep, go ahead.
Shelley, I was wondering, at the time that you were incarcerated, you had a son that you said your mother was taking care of. Can you talk a little bit about that whole process? How is your son? What happened there?
He's doing great. He's still with my mother, although he's actually here today with me because of the amount of time that I was in prison. And then I had to do another 1.5 years at the halfway house. And then I got the job at Microsoft, so I had to stay in San Francisco, and my son lives in Sacramento. He really just developed a bond with my mother. And so I thought getting out, and when I was ready to reintegrate with him, it would be an easy process, but he was not having it. So he's still with my mother today, but I get to spend time with him. In fact, I can bring him in real quick. You guys want to say hi to him?
Definitely.
Yeah. Hold on a second.
Do it.
Hey, Jace, come here.
He's with the puppies.
Yeah. That's so great.
Tell him he's going to be on TV. There's only 46 people here. That's all.
Well, we're recording it, so he'll go national soon.
That's right. That's right.
How about you? Come say hi. He's shy.
Oh, hi. Hi, Cutie. Hi.
That's Jace.
Nice to meet you. How old are you?
8 years old.
What's your favorite subject in school?
Math.
Yeah, he's really good at math.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Is that a PlayStation sweatshirt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm a gamer. I've got PlayStation.
Yeah, he's
Very cool.
Game.
Everyone.
Yeah. Well, they were. I was telling him my story, so they wanted to say hi to you because they were asking about you.
Very nice to meet you.
Play your game now. Thanks.
Yeah. And can you say hi to your husband?
Yeah. Say hi to my husband. This is Jeremiah.
Hey, Jeremiah.
How you doing?
And this is Everett, Jace's friend.
This is our neighbor.
Hey.
All right.
All right, guys. Come on, boys. Bye.
Nice meeting you all. She's got an amazing story.
Thanks.
Yeah.